How's everyone doing? This is Mr. Nolan, and I've got your 10 A and B trade routes notes. So as we start to come out of the early Middle Ages, move into the later part of the Middle Ages, roughly the years 1000 to 1500 CE is what we're mostly going to be focusing on in this particular unit here. We're going to start to have the development of trade in the Eastern Hemisphere. Okay, remember, hemisphere is half a sphere. We are only talking about the Eastern Hemisphere for the most part this year. We'll spend one day on the Western Hemisphere. So we start to have trade start to fuel. So a couple of major trading networks are going to develop, and we're going to talk about them and the goods and ideas that are spread on them during this unit because they're important for you to know. So the first of our major trade routes is the Silk Road. The Silk Road is going to connect Europe. Okay, so we've got Europe here, Europe with the Middle East, with India and China. The Silk Road's our most major trade route. It is obviously older than the time period we're talking about. It dates back to the BC years. So the Silk Road is very old, connects China, basically connects all of Asia with Europe. All right, our next one are our maritime routes, and specifically they're in the Indian Ocean. Okay, maritime means over water. Okay, and our Indian Ocean trade routes are going to connect the Middle East, West Africa, India, and China, all by water. Now, we just talked about the Silk Road covering most of those areas and connecting them by land. The advantage to trading by sea, on the other hand, though, is in a large boat, we can carry more goods than we can in a wagon pulled by a horse or an ox or a donkey. We can do it faster. So our ocean trade in the Indian Ocean is going to allow trade to move more quickly and us to move larger amounts of goods in short periods of time. All right, now the next one, the Trans-Saharan route. Okay, the Trans-Saharan route is going to connect the Mediterranean with West Africa. Okay, the Mediterranean with West Africa. And the primary goods that are going to be traded here, and this is one that you're going to need to know, is we're going to have gold for salt. Wow, you can't read any of that. I'm sorry. Gold for salt. Gold goes that way, salt comes the other way. So we're going to have salt coming down to West Africa where it's incredibly hot. Salt allows them to preserve meat. There's a lot of gold in West Africa, which everybody loves gold, and that's headed to the Mediterranean. So the Trans-Saharan routes are across the Saharan Desert. That's what trans means, across. And that's going to connect the Middle East with West Africa. Now, our Northern European routes, we've already talked about once this year, okay, and that is going to connect the Black Sea with the Baltic Sea. And the primary things that's going to be spread along here is, if you remember, the Black Sea is where we have the city of Byzantium or Constantinople. And the primary good or idea that spreads along this Northern European trade route connecting these two bodies of water is going to be Eastern Orthodox Christianity and our Byzantine influences. All right, now the next one here is Western European Sea and River. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's just going to connect Western Europe with itself. The difference being that, again, as we've said earlier when we were talking about the Indian Ocean maritime routes, sea and river means we can move more goods. Larger quantities of things can be moved over water than they can be on land. Okay. And then our last one here, the South China Sea route, at least I think it's our last one. Our last one here, the South China Sea route, is going to connect China with Korea with Southeast Asia. All right. And again, this is going to be over water, so again, we're moving large amounts of goods. This one is going to be significant because this is where Buddhism is going to primarily spread. All right, now a couple of specific ideas or goods that you need to know and where they originate from. Okay, and this is down there in that bottom left-hand chart. Okay, the first thing that we need to know is we're going to have a lot of gold. Okay, and gold is specifically going to be coming from West Africa. The Ghana, Mali, and Songhai empires, which we will talk about later on in this unit, are going to send a lot of gold across the Sahara Desert, and they're going to get salt back in return. Second good that we have are spices from the lands around the Indian Ocean. These are going to move primarily along the maritime routes. And some of these spices are the things that you find so tasty, things like paprika, curry, pepper, all of these things that make your food taste so delicious. Okay? We don't have this in Western Europe. It originates in India and gets shipped out to other places. Our third thing is we're going to have textiles. Okay, textiles, for those of you who don't know, is generally speaking cloth or clothing of some sort or another. We're going to have it coming from China, India, and the Middle East. Silk going to be from China, and you're going to see cotton coming from India and the Middle East. So you're going to have all of these cloth goods being exchanged from those areas and going back to other places that don't have access to them. Porcelain, let me check my number 4. Porcelain is going to originate in China. We talked about this a long time ago. It's going to spread to Persia, where they're going to become very good at working with it, and then it's going to spread throughout the rest of the world from those two areas. Porcelain is, and they'll refer to it as, this is very fine china. Okay, it's like ceramics, but very fragile, very delicate. All right. And our last one here is amber. Amber is going to come from the Baltic region, so the northern European areas. It's going to spread south to the Black Sea on those trade routes, and from there to the rest of the world. For those of you who don't know what amber is, it's fossilized tree sap. So you have to find parts of the world where there are going to be a lot of pine trees prominent. Northern Europe. And again, for those of you who don't know about amber, please watch Jurassic Park or Jurassic World. That's where they get the dinosaur DNA from in those movies, and the whole place where we get those spectacular things from. Now, technologies. It's not just goods that are going to move. We also have the transfer of technologies. Our first technology here is going to be paper and printing money. Okay? This originates in China. We talked about it when we talked about our early China. Okay? Paper and print money is going to spread to Islam. Muslim world, Baghdad is going to become the capital of paper production for the entire western half of the Eastern Hemisphere. So paper money, those ideas spread from China to the Muslim world and then to the rest of Europe from there. Okay? New crops from India are going to be found, including the making of sugar. So we're going to have our first evidence of sugar coming out of India. We said spices and deliciousness comes from there. Sugar is the latest during this time period. Next up, we're going to have water wheels and windmills originate in the Middle East. Now you ask yourself, what do water wheels and windmills do? Well, hopefully most of you all know that windmills capture wind power to turn things. Here, you guys, if you ever drive on the New York State Thruway, you'll see them. That's how they power their toll stations. Now, in ancient times, they didn't have toll roads or the ability to harness electricity. So what are they powering with wind and with a water wheel? This is how we grind wheat into flour, okay? The grist mills, they have these big grinders that are water powered. You put the raw wheat in there and it gets ground down into really fine grained flour that we can then use to make bread. They're harnessing the power of water and wind to make this process easier. Our next one here, and this is a biggie. I cannot undersell how much importance these two have. The compass and the lateen sail are going to come from the Indian Ocean region. The compass allows us to always know what direction true north is. It helps us with navigation. Okay, navigation is easy at night when you can shoot the stars and you have the North Star. During the day, the sun is moving, so unless you know exactly what time it is, or you have a real good sense of direction, sometimes it's hard to remember east from west. A compass allows people to always know what direction north is and therefore what direction they're facing. And the lateen sail is important. As you can see down here, it's this kind of triangular sail thing. Okay, what the lateen sail allows us to do is it allows us to capture wind power. Now you're probably saying to yourself, Mr. Nolan, we've been capturing wind power since the ancient Egyptians, 4,000 years before this time period. Why is the lateen sail different? Okay, most of the sails that we've been talking about have been square sails, which capture the wind behind it and push forward. So if we're trying to go north, the wind has to be from the south. If the wind is coming from the south or coming from the north, we're not going anywhere with a flat sail. The lateen sail, for those of you who have ever been out on the Chesapeake Bay, you've seen ships do this. The lateen sail allows us to sail into the wind. Okay, as you can see, the sails are off to the side. So if we're sailing into the wind, we'll call that wind from the east in this case, instead of sailing right at it, what we're going to do is we're going to go sideways, pick up speed, and we're going to turn. Come back the other way, pick up speed, and do a turn. Pick up speed, and do a turn. Okay? Don't get me wrong. It's not a quick process, but it's a heck of a lot faster than sitting in place for 3 or 4 days waiting for the wind to change. This speeds up transportation, improves trade in the Indian Ocean. It's part of the reason the maritime trade that occurs in the Indian Ocean becomes such an important thing between the years 1000 and 1500. Okay? These two inventions are massively important. All right, a couple of key ideas that we need to know about. It's, again, not just technologies and goods that are getting spread along these trade routes. As we've already said before, printing and the idea of paper money is going to come from China. This leads to the production and access to books. This is also going to lead to more fluid currencies. We're going to have religions spreading all across the hemisphere. Okay, this is when our religions spread. Remember, we've talked about all year long, guys, religions spread by trade. Missionaries help, don't get me wrong. Trade is the fastest way for a religion to spread quickly. We are going to have Buddhism is going to spread from China. It had already spread to China from India. It's going to continue from China to Korea and Japan along that South China Sea trade route. It's going to greatly impact Japanese development, and Mr. Grimsland will talk about that in a later video this unit. Hinduism and Buddhism are going to continue out of India into the rest of Southeast Asia, into those islands, all that you see dotting down there between China and Vietnam, all the way down to Australia. Hinduism and Buddhism will spread to all of those islands and greatly influence them by overwater trade. And then Islam is going to spread into West Africa, Central and Southeast Asia. You already knew about the first two, or not the first two, you already knew about Central and Southeast Asia. West Africa is going to pick up Islam on that gold for salt trade. The gold's going to go to North Africa, which is predominantly Muslim, and then you're going to have Muslim traders taking salt back to West Africa, and with them goes their religion. And that is how religions are going to spread throughout the hemisphere during this unit. Okay, here is a map just to give you an idea of the spread of Buddhism throughout Southeast Asia. And then here is another one with the spread of Islam, which you already should know, because that is the Umayyad Empire. And that's all for this video, guys.